Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a poet who is the editor-in-chief of South Broadway Press and has written numerous poetry books. In addition to their work in the writing world, they has worked with Logan and Chadzilla Johnson on extended play music albums. Their name is Brice Maiurro, and my interview with Brice will follow the note-taking sounds. Brice Maiurro, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are the editor-in-chief for South Broadway Press. What is your job at South Broadway Press like?
South Broadway Press, my job there is, it's largely been a lot of fun. I've been doing that press for about 7 years. We've had a series of different editors and event organizers and other folks who've helped over the years, and things we've done include probably more than anything else, hosting events here in Colorado. We host a monthly open mic series called Snap Crackle Poetry. That's a morning open mic. So that's been a lot of fun. It's been really cool to get poets out while the sun's still up and see what that's like. Outside of that, we've done a handful of anthologies. Our go-to in the past has been to find an organization, usually here in Colorado, that we want to partner with and to do an anthology to raise funds for that organization. Two of the ones we've done is we did an anthology called Thought for Food, which raised money for Denver Food Rescue, and then we also did one called Dwell for the Village Institute, which is a refugee resource center in Aurora, Colorado. So that's kind of been the focus. As of late, I'm getting the itch to start publish some individual writers to do poetry collections again. So we currently have a call out for that, and gonna just kind of focus in on that and see how many folks we can get published over the next few years.
You've written the books Stupid Flowers, Hero Victim Villain, Clown Singing Opera, and The Heart is an Undertaker Bee. Without spoiling too much of each of your books, are they all poetry collections or chapbooks? And in any case, what are each of them about?
Oh yeah, that's a fun question. They are all poetry collections and chapbooks. They're all full length except for Clown Singing Opera, which is a chapbook that I put together. Stupid Flowers is my first collection that I published, and I kind of think of that collection as almost like shower thought poems. I think that they're very whimsical, or I kind of just run with strange ideas a lot in that book. I think a big theme in that book is finding like divinity in mundane moments, or finding the weirdness in mundane everyday moments. There's a poem in there where I'm washing the dishes and I just kind of go into a enlightened state and start to meditate or levitate off the ground. There's one about me imagining a giant robot attacking a city. So that one was a lot of fun, and I think the title really captures it pretty well, that these are just these stupid flowers or these stupid ideas that kind of blossomed into my mind and maybe weren't so stupid after all, but it was just kind of fun to entertain those ideas. Hero Victim Villain was my next book. At that point, I was performing a lot around Denver, Colorado, and some nearby states as well. And I was really involved with poetry series that's still ongoing called Punketry, where poets read over punk music. And I think that collection in particular has a very like punk rock, jazzy, like more stream of conscious kind of, but like rhythmic feel to it. And I think it kind of continues with some elements of the absurdity of Stupid Flowers, but I feel like Stupid Flowers was a little bit more internalized, whereas this was more energetic, energetic things that I was feeling about the world and kind of observing what was going on in the world around me. From there, I those two collections I often say we're kind of under the theme of being a city poet. I was, really in those days spending a lot of time walking around Denver, going out with friends and just seeing the world of Denver. And I think around the time of COVID, as it makes sense, my life really slowed down a lot, and it also kind of shifted gears. I met my now wife, and I just found myself kind of in a different phase of life where I was spending a lot more time in the Rocky Mountains and in nature in general. And that influenced my latest full length collection, The Heart is an Undertaker Bee, um, which has largely been influenced by that. And I think is me shifting really into thinking about our relationship with the natural world. I think we have to continue, of course, to talk about climate change and all the heavy things that are going on in the world and fighting that. Um, that being said, I think that collection in particular wants to also add to that story, like celebrating nature and leaning into cultivating our relationship with it and remembering why um, we I mean, it's pretty inherent, but why we need to take care of this planet that we're a part of and what the things that we've been disconnected from as humans over the last few hundred years as we've industrialized and kind of gotten ourselves into our current predicament. And that's a lot about all my books. Clown Singing Opera, I'll just briefly say, is a chapbook. That was just kind of a fun project, honestly. The dedication in that book actually is for fun. I wanted to take some of the weirdo short stories and poems I'd written over the years and put together a chapbook. So I self-published that one. I did a drawing for the cover, and I really just wanted to do something that was, I guess, cheap, like you can get a copy of that for $5, and I just wanted something that I could really just send out into the world in a more accessible way. And so I thought it'd be fun to put together some of my favorite weirdo pieces and publish them in a short collection in that way.
You've also written poetry for multiple publications, including but not limited to Hoot Review, Marrow Magazine, The Rumen, Suspect Press, and several others as well. Without spoiling too much about your poetry that you've written for various publications, what are some of those poems about?
Yeah, a lot of those are more recent works, and they're on those themes of nature I mentioned a bit, like our relationship with nature and our opportunity to slow down in our lives, to listen more to the natural world, to commune with the natural world, to re-engage with our reverence for the natural world. And I think in addition to that, and maybe more specifically, some of those poems are mushroom poems. I've, like a lot of folks, have in the last few years become very fascinated with everything fungi. A couple things that really helped me there were starting to forage, um, watching Fantastic Fungi, the documentary that really opened my mind up a lot to mushrooms, and I read a wonderful book too called Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Um, all of those things really made me realize that mushrooms from my childhood and in like the era I grew up in, I really feel like for the most part were seen as, I guess, just these ugly, dirty things that we don't really want to think about and that just kind of get in the way. And so to realize that there are these great doulas that are kind of serving to be the bridge between life and death and holding together networks of trees and have these incredible powers. Like, for example, I was reading about this breed of oyster mushrooms that can break down diapers in a world where we have massive amounts of diapers that we've not been able to compost in addition to other things. I've read about mushrooms that can break down gasoline to a similar purpose. So I think it mushrooms fascinate me because they are powerful, and I think they speak to the rebirth that we're going through. And I think that they deserve to be elevated in how we view them and think about them. So in particular influenced Destroying Angels, which is a type of mushroom. That was one of the poems published by Marrow magazine. And on the slow pace, I'm working on a collection of poems called A Poet's Field Guide to the Wild World of Mushrooms. And I've been piecing together poems about all these different mushrooms that I've seen and foraged and had a relationship with here in the Rocky Mountains.
What motivates you to write poetry?
Yeah, I love that question. Um, I think the original impetus of me writing poetry was I was seeking a space of to empower my own voice. I was seeking a space where I could really be free to go wherever I needed to within the poem, I suppose, in this situation, or like to explore my identity. I think that sometimes there's a lot of barriers put up and a lot of things that tell us who we are and who we're not. And I think part of the impetus of me getting into poetry was realizing that I had this beautiful space to really be whoever I wanted and say whatever I wanted and to really find myself in that way. And I think as time has gone on, it's just proven to be a good lifelong friend. Um, I think it's proven as a form of ritual and for me to mark where I'm at in my life and what I might be going through. I think it's kind of a mirror in that regard. And I think as far as outside of myself, it's really introduced me to community in the way that words can lead to actions, and those actions can change our world. So I think I'm also drawn to poetry by its ability to shift the collective consciousness towards hopefully those things we value most, freedom and love and beauty.
What are the easiest and hardest aspects of writing poetry for you?
I think that something I appreciate about being a poet is it's an accessible art form. I think that's part of what makes it easy is, I've jotted poems down on napkins in restaurants or on my phone while I'm waiting at the DMV or, in a 10-minute segment before I have to get going somewhere else. It's something that you really can integrate into your life and make space for. Um, so I think that's something I appreciate about it. Um, I think with the poems generally being shorter, it's like a tangible thing that you can present to people. I found that my friends have asked me to read poems at their weddings and their and big celebrations or even in moments of grief. I've read poems before at funerals and celebrations of life, and I think the ease there is that a poem is something that you can um, easily bring into these major milestones of a lived life. I think the hard part of writing poetry is kind of what I've been leaning into lately. I've really been over the last 2 months in a space of writing every day, and it's almost like meditation. I guess it is a form of meditation in the fact that I kind of got in a rhythm. Poems were coming out, and then after a while, it starts to become more than just the direct discipline of writing the poem, but it becomes an investigation into your mind and what else is going on there, and what distracts you from wanting to keep writing, and what pulls you away from writing poetry. And um, I think it's a the discipline I've learned maybe in more detail is to refocus yourself and to remember your reason why for writing the poems. I think there's an element of starting out from a place of energy and discovery and then writing day after day, kind of hitting a point where I feel myself becoming kind of a caricature of myself in my own poetry, or like the form has appeared and I'm just repeating that same form. So honoring that form and figuring out what I've learned from it, but also seeing the box I've kind of been trapped in and finding ways to escape that box and continue to diverge and continue to grow. So I guess in that way, I see it as a very meditative practice, which is such a joy of the process. and also something that's very hard about it.
Regarding your poetry chapbooks and collections, how were those published?
The My first one and Clown Singing Opera were self-published, which I advocate for at times. I'm really glad I self-published Stupid Flowers because it empowered me to really own my art in a way that I've not seen people be able to with certain publishers. The publishers I've worked with, Stubborn Mule Press and Middle Creek Publishing, have been wonderful and very engaging and adaptive and willing to work with me in my vision of my work. But I think um, publishing Stupid Flowers, publishing it as a part of the press I was running at the time, and utilizing it as a tool to bring more attention to that press and more readership and more poets to publish was a very useful and successful thing. And then Spartan Press was with Jeanette Powers out of Kansas City, who I met in passing, and they just have a wonderful way about them. And when I heard they were starting a press, I wanted to be involved in it. So we partnered to do Hero, Victim, Villain, and Middle Creek is very aligned with where my head's at now as an ecological press. I was really drawn to their mission statement, which I have here. I won't read it all, but it says Middle Creek's publishing identification as a human ecology press is meant to clarify an aspect of the quality in the works we consider for publication and is meant as a guide to those considering submitting work to us. They're interested in publishing work that illuminates the human experience of connection to each other, ourselves, and to the world we share. And that really resonated with me. I think I always see poetry as a partnership where the question is less like what's in it for me to publish with this group and more so like how can we grow together. And Middle Creek and Spartan Press were two presses that I very much wanted to grow with and support and have support me. So that's kind of what led me to those publishing decisions.
I have two more questions in this interview, and the first of these two is about your work with Logan Chan and Chadzilla Johnson, respectively, on extended play music albums. What was it like to work with Logan and Chadzilla on their EPs?
It was wonderful with both of them. I'll speak to Chadzilla first. I met Chadzilla through an event called Jazzatry, which is the sister event of Punkatry, which I mentioned, where poets read over jazz music. He was the drummer, and I'm realizing in this interview, I'm just really attracted to people's energies, and Chadzilla had a really awesome energy. He teaches young people music, and you can see that in his high level of energy and his excitement and his curiosity and his love of music and really his love of life. And with that in mind, when I released Hero, Victim, Villain, I wanted to emphasize the rhythmic and jazzy, almost like the jazz drum quality of the album, or of the book, I should say. And with that in mind, I asked Chad if he would drum at my book release, and he agreed to, and it went really well. I feel like his drumming was really in conversation with the rhythms of my poems and the themes of my poems, and I enjoyed that so much that we just met up and recorded an album together. Everything is on Fire, this EP. And Logan Chan is someone here in Denver who I really respect as well. He's a friend of mine, and I loved his music and felt like it offered something different than Chadzilla's. And really, it was twofold. I wanted to engage with him as an artist that I respect, and also I wanted that avenue to get to know him better as a friend. So it was wonderful doing this collection with him. He lives very close to me. I'm just east of Cheeseman Park, which is a really central park to Denver and a big part of its story. And he's just south of Cheeseman Park. So we would get together at his place and record these songs. And that's why it became known as the Cheeseman Park Sessions. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And it was really interesting. And I find every time I work with musicians, it really challenges me to think about what I'm doing in my poetry and also how I can be a better communicator and a better listener and a better speaker when I'm in a conversation with another artist.
One final question. What do you love most about living in Colorado?
Yeah, that answer would change a lot over the years because I'll start by saying one of the hard things is just to witness the gentrification and to witness the loss of a lot of really wonderful communities in Denver, in Aurora, throughout this whole state. And I think there's these embers still of the spirit of Colorado that is more collectivist than a lot of the individualistic instincts of a lot of the United States that I'm really drawn to. I think community is a really important value in Denver, and I think that there are those people who are still holding on to that in its changing face. So I would say that that's largely what my answer has been. And I also think that in this current era of my life, I'm really grateful to live at the base of one of the most beautiful mountain ranges on the planet. And I don't take that for granted. And I really try to get out into those mountains as much as possible and really have a relationship with them and celebrate them and learn from them. And I think that that balance between the city and the mountains is something that I has been maybe the most formative part of my identity. That's my dedication in The Heart is an Undertaker Bee. It says that these poems exist somewhere between a city and a mountain, and I think I exist somewhere between a city and a mountain, and that's what I love about being in Colorado is living in that tension.
Brice, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were a wonderful guest.
And thank you, Aaron. Be well, and yeah, thank you to everyone listening in.
Brice was a fantastic guest to interview. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.